Welcome to Success in Brief. I'm your host, Rosanne Felicello. In every episode, we spotlight successful women in the law. We discuss with them their journey to success. We talk about the difficulties and the trade-offs, along with the highlights and the benefits, and about what success means to each of them. We hope to inspire you with these stories on your own path to success. Hello, my name is Rosanne Felicello, and this is Success in Brief. I'm thrilled today to welcome my friend Jordana Haviv to today's podcast. Jordana is a partner at Freedman Normand Friedland, a law firm here in New York City, and I'm excited to speak to Jordana so she can tell us about her journey to that position and what she's learned along the way. So let's jump right in. Jordana, what was your path to becoming an attorney?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to speak with you. I have one of those sort of typical moments of recollection from my childhood when I was arguing with my dad and, he got annoyed and was like, well, you'd make a great lawyer. And it kind of stuck with me. And, as I got older, I really sort of enjoyed like puzzles and trying to figure things out, logic. And I sort of always had that in mind. And then I did some internships. I interned at the Bronx Defenders in criminal defense. I took a paralegal job and then sort of testing my interest in all of it along the way. And then I ultimately applied to law school after that. And I've loved it. I mean, I really did take a few steps before getting to law school to make sure that that's really what I wanted, because I got that advice quite a bit, especially when I was paralegaling at Paul Weiss. But that's what brought me to the profession.
So how long were you a paralegal for before you went to law school?
I was a paralegal for 2 years.
Wow. And at Paul Weiss, you're seeing how it works in the trenches of big law, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I had a lot of junior attorneys telling me not to do it and not to go to law school. And I just really enjoyed the experience. I thought it was really fun. I got to take a bit more of a substantive role in some of the pro bono cases, which I thought was fun. I remember working on an asylum application and putting together country conditions for one of the associates that I was working with at the time. And I just thought it was really interesting and it seemed great. And I still wanted to go, even though I had a bunch of people who I'm still friends with telling me not to.
And you went back to Paul Weiss after law school, is that right?
I did. I had a great experience there. I thought the folks there were really incredibly brilliant and really supportive. I knew a couple of the partners from when I was a paralegal. I knew a couple of the associates. I came back. I did the interviews. I did the whole process. I met with, all sorts of different firms. I'm someone who likes to sort of vet all of my options. But ultimately, it just felt like the right fit just in terms of culture and the focus on litigation. And it was nice to go back to somewhere that I knew a little bit.
Yeah, that must take a little bit of the, sort of sting out of going from the transition from law school to practice.
Totally.
So what kind of work were you doing when you started at Paul Weiss?
So I actually ended up doing a lot of the Title IX and Title VII sexual harassment and discrimination matters, because those were sort of becoming, more prevalent right around the time that I was starting. And I got involved with a couple of partners there that did a lot of those cases, and they were really fantastic, really great mentors. The teams were really small, which I really enjoyed because, there are, of course, these sort of massive sprawling cases that some of the larger firms take. And I really liked being able to get a handle on all the facts and all of what was going on and, be in the room with the client. And that was sort of a really great experience as a young attorney to sort of be, I was in mediations with the general counsel of some of these institutions and corporations, and it was really fun and fun for them to look at me and ask about the facts, because that's, of course, your role as a junior associate. And I got a lot of experience in that area. I mean, I did a lot. We did, obviously there's white collar, there's investigations, securities. I did a lot of pro bono. I worked on death penalty cases. When I got there, I had been working at Brian Stevenson's clinic at NYU, and I wanted to continue that work. So I did really a bunch of different things and loved being a generalist. But I thought those cases were really interesting, particularly with respect to the educational institutions, because the guidance kind of put schools in a very difficult position of having to semi-police, these encounters between college-age students. And it's a difficult line to walk when you're going to have someone who's unhappy with the result on however you come out.
Yeah, no, it's a weird time, right? You're assumed to be an adult, but then you really kind of are in a nanny state as well, in a sense. So
totally.
Very interesting time of life and for those kinds of questions.
Absolutely.
So after a few years at Paul Weiss, you went to do a clerkship for a federal judge, Judge Marrero. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Judge Marrero is great. It's something everyone had always recommended. I obviously was super interested to go and see the cases and see what happens behind the scenes. Judge Marrero is just absolutely amazing. He's incredibly smart. He's open door policy, works very closely with his clerks. We had, like a holiday party in the winter and a picnic in Central Park in the summer, although some of those have been on a little hiatus due to COVID. But he really keeps the Chambers family close. And it was just a really valuable experience as a young attorney to see. We got to do some trials. I got to watch some other trials that were happening in SDNY at the time we were there. I actually got very close with one of my co-clerks who I now work with at my firm. That's how I came to the firm. But it was just a really fantastic experience. I highly recommend it to any junior attorney just because it's such an unbelievable experience to be able to be learning in the presence of a judge who has so much experience and so much wisdom to offer.
Yeah, and you get to see a lot of different kinds of cases, right?
Totally. And you get to write, which is, as you know, so important. And research and sort of do all these skills that are so important, and you get to sort of cut through some of the there's not really doc review or discovery responses and objections, so it's really just in some ways just really the most fun stuff. It was a great experience. As I said, I recommend it to everyone that I can.
No, did you know you were going to be going back to Paul Weiss after your clerkship, or did you have to reapply to law firms again after that?
No, I was, allowed to go back if I so chose. And I had this really great experience in my first 3 years. I thought about it one should always be thinking about, where they want to be. But I just had these great mentors who are, allowing me to work on these small cases and do really great work. And by the time I left, I'd done, motion to dismiss briefing and lots of, sort of atypically junior tasks in big law. So I went back because I just had such a great experience, and I had a really great time in those couple of years, but I wanted to get a little more experience, a little more substantive experience, which is how I started looking to go somewhere else. It was time to do a deposition and all the things. And now, as we were just talking about, I did 10 in the last 6 weeks. So certainly gotten what I was looking for.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, so the firm you're at now is a much smaller firm compared to Paul Weiss. It's sort of a startup law firm, the way I would frame it. But what made you go there, and how did you, find that opportunity?
Yeah, so I was looking around and working with a recruiter, and, I'd seen some firms. I had sort of a very narrow list of things that I wanted. I really wanted to stay generalist. I wanted to practice sort of at the same level. I wanted sort of nice, collegial, smart people who, really valued the law, but also valued family. That was important to me. And, I found that my friend, I was actually telling him about another interview that had not gone great. And, it was sort of not what I was looking for. And he was telling me, call me tomorrow. We were at actually Judge Marrero's 20th anniversary on the bench dinner. He said, call me tomorrow. Let's get drinks. So we got drinks, and he told me about this firm and, the ability to sort of have your voice heard and be part of, as you said, it is sort of a startup culture. So you really have the ability to influence things and have your voice heard, which is great. And it was really nice to be in an office where everyone and you're really close with them. So I interviewed, and I kept interviewing, and I kept asking questions, and, ultimately thought it would be an exciting adventure, and it certainly has been.
That sounds great. As you know, I know one of the partners at your firm very well. I had worked with him almost 20 years ago now, I guess it was. 19 years ago when they were local counsel to when I was still in big law. So I think it's a testament to the quality of people when you're able to keep in touch with someone for so long. And he's a fabulous attorney. So glad
He
to be
is
there.
very impressive. Yeah, he's just, I mean, he's the greatest writer. He's the greatest mentor. And I also, I really love how he's, probably one of the hardest working attorneys I've ever met. But he also, when he needs to, takes time off to be with his family. And, he's the best.
He's great. That is great.
He is.
So what challenges have you faced throughout your career as an attorney?
Ooh, that's a good one. So look, I mean, I think, like, as I'm sure you know, and many women out there know, I think it's hard to sort of find your, the right voice and the right way to be, particularly because there are sort of societal pressures that don't necessarily lend, it doesn't always work to take like a very aggressive stance. It doesn't always sort of, at least it doesn't work the same way necessarily as it does for men. So I think you have to sort of find your, like even with depositions, you have to find your style and your lawyering style. And that I think is kind of a challenge because I've looked up at, women above me sort of trying to find that as well. And I think it's not the easiest thing to be in a room, as I'm sure you often are, with like inevitably more often than not being outnumbered by men. And particularly as you are, being a parent of children is also really hard because there's just a lot of demands. And I think those have been, trying to make sure I'm doing everything that I want to be doing for the client at home and, still sleeping a little and showering every day. And I think those have been, especially with a young
every day. That's amazing.
Well, I didn't say I always succeeded, but trying. But yeah, I mean, the whole, like the typical trying to do it all, as well as sort of finding your voice in the law and finding, the style that works for you.
Yeah, I think it really is important to find the right place that will allow you to flourish that way, because it's not possible everywhere.
No, and I totally agree with that. I mean, Freedman Normand Friedland has been great for that. They promoted me to partner while I was out on maternity leave, which I thought spoke volumes about, what the firm's values are. And I really appreciated that. And, I was excited to get back and work, twice as hard just to like, yeah, woo. But I totally agree. I mean, being surrounded by people who get it and support you, and it's just all about sort of finding the time, just working at some days work gets everything and some days home gets everything. And most days it's a weird mix, but that's definitely an ongoing challenge that I would say I face.
It's a long game. I know you have a young one at home, but it's a long game.
Yeah.
It'll work out.
I hope so. No, I know I will, but that's probably the most difficult.
Yeah, you touched on this one a little bit, but do you feel that you've used your perspective as a woman in your role as an attorney and how you go about practicing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I learned from a lot of really strong, brilliant women at Paul Weiss about sort of like the value of credibility and judgment and how important that is in this profession. And I think those have been, since I learned, and men too, of course, but, a lot of the people that I worked with at Paul Weiss were women. And I've just since then, that's always been sort of like the guiding light of my practice, like preserving your credibility in front of the judge and, no matter what, and just exercising good judgment and knowing sort of where, look, you're advocating for a client. Everyone knows that. So you sometimes have to make arguments that aren't your favorite because you're serving the client and that's the job. But, being able to do that while still sort of walking the right line to make sure that you maintain your credibility with the court. And the judges understand that, of course, too. But those are sort of guiding principles that I learned very early. I don't know, it's tough to say whether that's like a female-male division, but it's certainly something that I learned from my mentors and has always been sort of very important. And I've probably been on the, I tend to be on the more conservative side of the law in terms of, less rhetoric and, just the facts. But that may be training rather than.
Yeah. I think big law tends to be a little bit less with the rhetoric. So
yeah, just the facts.
Yeah, supposedly just the facts.
Supposedly. Well, yeah, you got to slip it in. That's the whole game.
Which facts?
Yeah.
Just the facts. Which facts?
Just the ones we like.
Yes, exactly. As you've gone about making these different decisions in your career, so you've made a few transitions throughout time, do you rely on specific people for career advice, or do you keep your own counsel? How do you find that you make decisions best about making, as your career's progressed?
Yeah, I mean, I like to talk to everyone. That's sort of especially with the new firm, it was nerve-wracking a little bit at the beginning to go from, like a very established place to sort of a new startup which of course had inherent risk. I'm thrilled that we're doing so well and everything. But obviously at the beginning, it was sort of, I'm a generally risk-averse person. So this was a lot for me. But I spoke to a lot of people. I spoke to, I know this is a little taboo in the big law world, but I told my mentors at Paul Weiss that I was looking to leave and do something else. And I explained why, and they understood it. And I took all of their counsel. I spoke to, friends of friends who knew folks at the new shop. And I spoke to, even my recruiter who didn't introduce me to the new shop. I took his advice. And I spoke to my judge, of course, Judge Marrero, and my husband, who probably knows me better than all those people. So I kind of took it all in and then, weighed it all and ultimately thought it was a risk worth taking. And it certainly was. But it definitely, before the firm was even launched, it was definitely sort of a scary moment. I'd spent so much time building up a reputation at Paul Weiss, and I wanted to make sure that wasn't for nothing. And it wasn't, but it was really exciting at the same time. To be part of something new. And that's ultimately why I decided to make the jump. But yeah, I like to get all the information and process it and then make my decision. Definitely not a lone wolf.
That's good advice for others to take as well. I think it's important to get counsel from others that you trust, right?
Yeah,
and
of course.
It's not that at the end of the day, you have to go take your own counsel as well, but I think it's important to get other perspectives.
Yeah, you have to be comfortable with it yourself too, right? And that's why, I always joke with Ted and the other partners, like I went back to them so many times. I was like, I have more questions. And I'm sure they were fed up with me, but, I ultimately, it had to be my decision in the end. And I ultimately got there. That's probably the biggest career move that I've made. And it was, everyone tells you it's at such an important time, but I don't know how much stock to put in that. I think if you're smart and good, you can always find a way to do what you want. But I'm really glad I made the decision. I'm also glad that I made it, sort of knowing, sort of vetting it and then doing all the due diligence I wanted. So I felt comfortable with it myself and was excited to make that choice.
Right. So it was more exciting than scary.
Yes, at the end. At first it was scary. And then at the end it was more, I was like, well, this will be fun. And, someone friend of a friend that I talked to who knew some of the guys starting the firm had said, and I'll probably never forget this, worst case scenario is you have a story about how you took a risk. And I was like, oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Especially in a profession that has a lot of risk averse people. I didn't mind, if I had to explain it away in the future, I didn't mind that way of explaining it away. So
at least you can spin it.
Exactly. Always spin.
So as your practice has grown and changed throughout the years from Paul Weiss to now that you've transitioned from being an associate to partner at Freedman Normand Friedland. I forget the name of it because it's changed a few times, right? But do you continue to rely on your law school training, do you find? And, how have you gone about making that transition from associate to partner?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the law school training is there, especially when you're first getting into something. It's the initial, like, okay, what are all the issues, right? I mean, I just did this last week. We had a new case and I was just looking at everything. And the first time I just had like a running issues list, just like in, the tort law exam. And so that's certainly still there. And, I had these amazing professors at NYU and I keep in touch with some of that. One of them is now the dean of the law school. He's fantastic. Whenever any Civ Pro question comes up, I always think of him. I also think, to like a lot of my mentors at Paul Weiss, how did they approach things? What would they have thought in any given situation? So I think it's really a mix. And, honestly, now that I've been here for 3 years, I think a lot about what Ted or what Amos would think about. What would they be focused on if they were looking at this? I think for me, it's definitely a mix between sort of like the technical legal training at law school and the sort of learning by osmosis and watching people have done this so many times before, and taking in as much as you can about how they approach things and what are they thinking about, what's on their mind, how would they be evaluating this. That's sort of probably a mix between those two.
And how have you approached or learned about the business development side of what we do?
Yeah.
As a partner, you're not just responsible for getting, the work done. You also have to get the work in. So
yes. So, I've talked to like a lot of folks, even as I was just leaving, I started talking to people at Paul Weiss. And then when I got to the new firm, I started talking to them as well about, what are your approaches to all the partners? And we have partners who have totally different approaches, right? Some are very targeted or, niche areas. Some get a lot of referrals. Eric is in the white collar space, so he has a lot of referrals from his time as an AUSA. And you sort of have to find your own, choose your own adventure. So I've sort of, I've brought them in. They're all incredibly supportive on pitches or on lunches or dinners. And, I've really tried to sort of make my own sort of set of friends. I have a lot of friends in the Paul Weiss community or the expat Paul Weiss community, law school friends and the like that I've been sort of staying in touch with. And then, one thing that I always tell junior attorneys now is like, just, have like one meeting a week. If it's a coffee or a lunch or a dinner, whatever it is, or drinks, go and have one meeting a week. That's 52 meetings at the end of the year. And 7 years from now, when you become a partner, if that's what you choose, you're going to have this great network that you've kept up with. And I think, with COVID and, you go to big law and you get busy, you kind of sometimes forget and you lose touch with people. And it's great to really keep those networks up and stay in touch. And that's really how a lot of the business comes in, as I'm sure you know.
That's true. It's all relationships, right?
Yeah. But look, it's hard. It's like especially billing in, 6-minute increments. I think, what are the next 6 minutes of my time best spent as? Doing work, doing business development, with my kid, taking a nap. So I think it's difficult in our profession to sort of balance it all. And, that's why just trying, I think from my perspective, trying to do, a certain number of meetings a week or a year or whatever it is, and sort of seeing where those go is the approach that I've adopted right now.
Yeah, and your approach might change as you move on, as your child gets older, things like that. Things
totally
might shift.
Sure. I'm sure they will.
What do you value most about having your law degree?
Oh, wow. Being able to practice, is that too basic of an answer?
No, I just if you enjoy practicing, that's definitely, that's true.
Yeah, I really do love it. I was, like, as I said, we were just in these depositions, but it's really fun. I'm still sort of young enough and hungry enough that I love being in the trenches. And, we have trial coming up in December for this matter. So we have summary judgment, and it's really fun to learn a case. Especially like this one's very technical. So it takes a little to get over that initial hump. But once you get in it and you start finding these documents and you get these admissions and depositions, I love it. I love writing. I really like fact finding. I really enjoy the job. I like being in a sort of a box and trying to get out of it I do primarily defense work, although the firm does about 50-50 plaintiff defense, but I like the defense side work. I like being able to find a way out.
Yeah, we do a mix of both as well. And it's interesting. It's definitely a different perspective you have depending on which side of the V you're on. And in terms of everything from the initial outset of the case to the conclusion, right? So
yeah,
it's very interesting having both. You do also have a life outside of work, though. So how do you balance it?
Oh, I'm still working on that. I think one thing that's great about the firm is they're very flexible. There's not a lot of, micromanaging or, they're flexible. We have a lot of associates with young kids, a lot of junior partners with young kids, and they understand the demands. And I just try and sort of, fit it all in. So if I want to go off early and, do a dinner with my husband and son, and then log back online, the flexibility is super important to me. I think that really allows me to do everything and get it all in. But I don't know that I'm necessarily balancing it all, but I am doing my best.
So it's, I was just speaking to another attorney who's actually a GC in-house now. And, she referred to it as a double helix. It's really not a balance. It's like interweaving, keeping everything, sort of on the same path somewhat,
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a challenge, but I think it's also just life, right? We all have things that we're trying to juggle at the same time. So.
No, totally. And everyone, even outside of the law, there's so many, it's just everyone's dealing with so much. So we're all I like the double helix. That's a nice way.
I really liked it.
It's just constantly, keeping everything on track. It's hard though, because you never feel like you're giving 100% to everything, which as sort of type A lawyers is always difficult.
Yeah. Or you're giving 100% one day, this 6 minutes.
Exactly.
And 100% this other 6 minutes. But
yeah, I feel like you hear those things about like women running through like lists at the end of the day, like who got what and who didn't get what they needed. I feel like I do that all the time. I'm like, I didn't get to this and I didn't get to that and Julian didn't get this. And but yeah, it's so much fun. It's totally worth it, but it's definitely a lot to try and do it all.
It is. Okay, 3 more questions for you, then I'll let you get back to your 6-minute billing. These ones are rapid fire, so
Okay.
They should be quick. We'll see. If you couldn't be an attorney, so you didn't go to law school, you're not going to be an attorney, what other career would you choose?
Ski instructor.
Oh, that was quick.
Yeah.
Ski instructor. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're a good skier, I take it.
Well, I'm pretty good. I'm not an instructor, but that's because of all the law. I'd probably have more time if I weren't doing so much law.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love to ski. It's, one of my favorite things. I actually wish I had gone and done a year as an instructor, but maybe I still will.
Yeah, there's always the next opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What is the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you graduated law school?
Wow, a lot of things. But let's see. Probably like none of the decisions you're making are as big as you think they are. You take your job after law school and you think it's like the most important thing that you're ever going to do, but it's just a job. And you take your next job and you think that's the most important because you're leaving when you're most marketable. And it's so important to find the right place. And it's never the most important. Things sort of work out. And, I try to recommend that to people now, even when they're looking at our firm. I'm like, look, I'd love for you to come here, but, don't worry. Like, you'll find a great place and you'll be able to do what you want to do no matter what. This move that you're trying to make is not the most important thing in the world.
Right. No, I like that a lot. Can be flexible.
Yes.
And lastly, would you recommend a law career to a woman considering law school today?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. There's certainly challenges, and I try to, constantly talk about them with people younger than me and older than me. But, just to make sure it's all out there and everyone's sort of paying attention to the issues that I think are attendant to being a woman in the law. But it's an amazing career. It's incredibly rewarding, really fun. And especially if you have a great group of people to do it with, like I do, I would absolutely recommend it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's been great chatting with you and getting to know you better. And hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me. Yes, absolutely.
You've been listening to Success in Brief with your host, Rosanne Felicello. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others. You can catch prior episodes at www.felicellolaw.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.